As the royal car came to a gentle halt outside Westminster Abbey, the world seemed to hold its breath for a moment. The ancient stone walls of the abbey rose majestically against the clear blue sky, their intricate Gothic spires reaching toward the heavens as if in silent prayer. It was a place where centuries of history had unfolded, where kings and queens had been crowned, marriages celebrated, and lives mourned. Today, it stood ready once again to bear witness to a defining moment in the story of the British monarchy. Prince William stepped out first, his polished shoes touching the pavement with quiet authority. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing every detail of his composed expression and perfectly tailored suit. Yet beneath the calm exterior, his heart raced with a mix of emotions. He paused for a brief second, letting his eyes sweep over the scene before him. Thousands of people had gathered behind barriers, their faces alight with excitement and admiration. Some held banners bearing messages of goodwill, while others waved flags so enthusiastically that they seemed to blur into streaks of red, white, and blue. William offered a small smile and a nod, acknowledging the warmth of the crowd before turning back to help Kate and the children exit the vehicle. Kate emerged next, her elegant demeanor masking the flurry of thoughts racing through her mind. She moved gracefully, her heels clicking softly against the ground as she adjusted the hem of her dress with practiced ease. Her gaze darted around, taking in the grandeur of the abbey and the sea of faces surrounding them. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to marvel at how far she had come. From a young woman studying at university to standing here today as a duchess and mother to future royals. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on her shoulders, but she carried it with poise, knowing that her role extended beyond herself. Behind her, Prince George and Princess Charlotte stepped out tentatively, their small hands clasped tightly in those of their parents. George looked up at his father with wide eyes, silently seeking reassurance, while Charlotte clung to her mother's hand, her tiny fingers gripping it firmly. Both children were dressed impeccably, their outfits reflecting the formality of the occasion. Despite their youthful innocence, they seemed to sense the importance of the day. Every movement felt deliberate, every step carefully measured, as if they instinctively understood that all eyes were upon them. The family began their slow walk toward the entrance of the abbey, flanked by security personnel who ensured their path remained clear. As they moved forward, the cheers of the crowd grew louder, echoing off the stone walls and filling the air with an almost electric energy. "God save the King!" Someone shouted, prompting a ripple of applause from those nearby. Others called out greetings or simply cheered, their voices blending into a symphony of celebration. William glanced down at his children occasionally, offering them encouraging smiles when they appeared overwhelmed. Kate, too, leaned down briefly to whisper something to Charlotte, her words soft and reassuring. For the Cambridges, this short walk was more than just a physical journey. It was a symbolic one. Each step brought them closer to the heart of a ceremony steeped in tradition and meaning, a ceremony that connected them not only to their ancestors, but also to the hopes and dreams of millions. As they approached the towering wooden doors of the abbey, William couldn't help but feel a surge of pride mixed with humility. This was not just about titles or crowns. It was about service, unity, and the enduring bond between the monarchy and the people. When they finally reached the threshold of the abbey, the family paused for a moment, allowing photographers to capture the image of four figures standing together against the backdrop of history. The sunlight streamed down, casting golden highlights on their faces and clothes, as if nature itself sought to bless the occasion. Then, with a final glance at the cheering crowd, they stepped inside, leaving behind the noise and spectacle of the outside world. The cool, hushed interior of the abbey enveloped them, signaling the beginning of a sacred ritual that would forever change the course of their lives and the life of the nation they served. As the final notes of the Coronation anthem echoed through Westminster Abbey, a profound sense of unity settled over the congregation. The ceremony had been steeped in centuries-old traditions, prayers recited in Latin, oaths sworn with unwavering solemnity, and blessings bestowed upon the new king. But beneath the layers of ritual lay a deeper message, the enduring bond between the monarchy and the people it served. For Prince William and Kate, this was more than just a formal event. It was a reaffirmation of their shared mission to uphold the values that defined their family's role within the nation. The moment the Archbishop placed the crown on King Charles I's head, a collective gasp rippled through the abbey. It was as if time itself paused for a heartbeat, allowing everyone present to absorb the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Cheers erupted from outside, where thousands had gathered to celebrate, their voices carrying faintly into the sacred space. Inside, however, the atmosphere remained hushed, filled instead with tears of joy, whispered prayers, and quiet nods of approval. William stood tall, his expression one of pride and reverence, while Kate clasped her hands together, her eyes glistening with emotion. They exchanged a glance, wordlessly acknowledging the significance of the moment, not just for their family, but for the entire country. For William, the coronation reinforced the importance of service, a value instilled in him by both his grandmother and his mother. As he looked around the abbey, he saw faces young and old, rich and humble, united by a common thread of hope and loyalty. He thought about how the monarchy had evolved over the years, adapting to changing times while staying rooted in its core principles. Today marked another step in that evolution, with his father taking on the mantle of leadership at a time when the world needed stability more than ever. William felt a renewed determination to carry forward the lessons he had learned, ensuring that the next generation would inherit a legacy built on compassion, resilience, and trust. Kate, too, reflected on the broader meaning of the day. Her journey into the royal family had taught her that titles came with responsibilities far greater than personal ambition. She glanced down at her children, who had borne the long ceremony with remarkable patience. George sat quietly, his earlier curiosity tempered by a growing understanding of the occasion's gravity. Charlotte leaned against her side, her small hand resting trustingly in Kate's palm. Even Louis, despite his occasional wiggles, seemed to sense the shift in energy as the ceremony concluded. In their innocence, the children embodied the future, a future Kate was determined to nurture with love, kindness, and purpose. When the newly crowned king rose to his feet, the congregation followed suit, offering a standing ovation that resonated through the ancient stones of the abbey. The applause wasn't just for Charles. It was for everything he represented: the continuity of tradition, the promise of renewal, and the unbreakable connection between the crown and its subjects. William stepped forward briefly to embrace his father, their hug conveying volumes without words. Kate offered a warm smile, her respect and admiration evident in her gaze. Together, they formed a tableau of familial support, reminding everyone present that behind the pomp and circumstance stood real people bound by love and duty. As the final hymn began, the choir's voices soared, filling the abbey with a melody so powerful it seemed to lift the very spirit of the room. Outside, bells rang out across London, their peals echoing triumphantly against the skyline. The sound signaled not only the end of the ceremony, but also the beginning of a new chapter. William took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and resolve. The hours ahead would bring parades, celebrations, and countless interactions with well-wishers, but for now, he allowed himself a private moment of gratitude for his family, for his father, and for the opportunity to contribute to something much larger than himself. Kate reached out and gently squeezed William's hand, her touch grounding him once again. Together, they turned toward the exit, ready to lead their children back into the bright daylight where crowds awaited. As they walked, the weight of responsibility settled firmly on their shoulders, but it was balanced by an equally strong sense of optimism. This day had reminded them of why they did what they did, not for glory or recognition, but for the chance to make a difference, however small, in the lives of others. With each step, they carried forward the torch of tradition, lighting the path for those who would follow in their footsteps. And as they emerged from the abbey to the roar of applause, they knew they faced the future not alone but together, as a family, as representatives of a cherished institution. And as steward, the morning sun rose slowly over London, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. The city was alive with energy, buzzing like a hive of bees preparing for something extraordinary. Streets that usually hummed with the ordinary rhythm of daily life were now filled with excitement, as people gathered to catch a glimpse of history unfolding. Flags fluttered gently in the breeze, and the air carried an unmistakable sense of anticipation. Today wasn't just another day. It was the coronation of King Charles II, a moment that would mark the beginning of a new chapter for the British monarchy. At Kensington Palace, Prince William stood by the window, gazing out at the scene below. His hands rested lightly on the windowsill, his mind lost in thought. He could hear the distant cheers of the crowd, feel the weight of tradition pressing down on him, and yet there was also a quiet pride swelling within his chest. This day wasn't just about his father becoming king. It was about family, duty, and carrying forward the legacy of those who came before. As he turned away from the window, as the heavy wooden doors of Westminster Abbey swung open, the bright daylight poured in, momentarily blinding those inside. The contrast between the cool, hushed interior of the Abbey and the vibrant energy outside was striking. Cheers erupted like a tidal wave as the newly crowned King Charles II stepped out, his figure framed by the ancient stone archway. Behind him, Prince William, Kate, and their children followed, each carrying themselves with quiet dignity despite the overwhelming noise. The crowd stretched endlessly, a sea of smiling faces, waving flags, and heartfelt greetings. It was clear that this moment meant something profound to so many people, not just as a celebration of royalty, but as a symbol of unity and continuity. The family paused briefly at the top of the steps, allowing photographers to capture the historic scene. Cameras flashed incessantly, creating a staccato rhythm that matched the pounding excitement in the air. William stood tall, his hand resting protectively on George's shoulder, while Kate held Charlotte close, her free hand gently guiding Louis forward. Despite the chaos around them, there was an unmistakable calm within the family, a quiet strength that seemed to radiate outward. For William and Kate, this wasn't just about being seen. It was about showing gratitude for the love and support they had received from the public over the years. Each smile, each wave, was a gesture of connection, a reminder that the monarchy thrived not because of its traditions alone, but because of the bond it shared with the people. George squinted against the sunlight, shielding his eyes with one hand while clutching his father's fingers tightly with the other. "Why are they all cheering?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible above the din. William knelt slightly, bringing himself closer to his son's level. "Because they believe in what we stand for," he replied warmly. "They're celebrating hope, for today and for tomorrow." George nodded thoughtfully, though the concept still felt vast and abstract to his young mind. Beside him, Charlotte waved shyly at the crowd, her small hand fluttering uncertainly before disappearing back into her mother's grasp. Even little Louis, perched in Kate's arms, seemed mesmerized by the spectacle, occasionally reaching out as if trying to touch the fluttering flags. Kate glanced down at her children, her heart swelling with emotion. She knew how daunting such moments could be for them. Surrounded by strangers, expected to perform under scrutiny, but she also saw glimpses of resilience in their wide-eyed expressions. They were learning, slowly but surely, what it meant to carry the weight of expectation with grace. As she looked up at William, their eyes met briefly, and she offered him a reassuring smile. Together, they were navigating uncharted waters, finding ways to balance tradition with modernity, duty with normalcy, and legacy with individuality. The family began their descent down the steps, moving slowly to accommodate the cheers and applause that seemed to grow louder with every step. A group of children near the front caught their attention, holding up handmade signs adorned with glittery letters, spelling out messages like "God Save the King" and "Long Live the Royals." Kate leaned down slightly to point them out to Charlotte, who giggled at the colorful drawings of crowns and scepters. "Look how hard they worked," Kate whispered, her tone filled with appreciation. "It's beautiful." In that simple exchange, the essence of the day crystallized. It wasn't about grandeur or ceremony. It was about human connection, shared joy, and collective hope. When they finally reached the bottom of the steps, the motorcade awaited, gleaming under the midday sun. Before climbing in, William turned back to face the crowd, raising a hand in acknowledgement. His expression was warm yet resolute, conveying both gratitude and determination. Kate did the same, her smile radiant, as she held Louis securely in her arms. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to stand still. The cheers, the cameras, the fluttering flags, all blending into a single unforgettable tableau of celebration and promise. Inside the car, the atmosphere shifted. The noise outside faded, replaced by the hum of the engine and the soft rustle of fabric as they settled into their seats. George pressed his face against the window once again, watching the jubilant crowds pass by. "Do you think everyone will always be this happy?" he asked innocently. Kate exchanged a glance with William, her expression thoughtful. "Not always," she admitted gently. "But days like today remind us why we work so hard, to bring happiness when we can." As the car pulled away, heading back toward Kensington Palace, the family sat in companionable silence. The hours ahead would bring reflection, rest, and perhaps even a few private laughs about the whirlwind of emotions they had experienced. But for now, inside the grand and ancient walls of Westminster Abbey, the air felt different, cooler, quieter, and heavy with a sense of reverence. The moment Kate stepped through the towering wooden doors, she was struck by the sheer magnitude of the space. Her eyes moved upward, tracing the intricate carvings on the stone pillars that stretched endlessly toward the heavens. Above her, the ceiling soared like the wings of an angel, its vaulted arches adorned with delicate details that spoke of centuries of craftsmanship. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the floor that seemed to dance in rhythm with the soft hum of whispered prayers and hymns. For a brief moment, Kate paused, letting the stillness wash over her. This wasn't her first time inside the Abbey. She had attended weddings, funerals, and services here before, but today felt different. Today, history was being written, and she was part of it. As she stood there, surrounded by the weight of tradition, she couldn't help but think about all the women who had walked these halls before her. Queens who had knelt in prayer, queens who had been crowned, and even those who had stood silently beside their husbands, supporting them through triumphs and trials. Each one had left behind a legacy, whether celebrated or forgotten. And now it was her turn to add her chapter to the story. Her thoughts drifted to Queen Elizabeth I, whose presence still lingered in the hearts of so many. She remembered the late monarch's grace, her quiet strength, and her unwavering commitment to duty. Kate wondered how Elizabeth must have felt standing in this very spot during her own coronation, decades ago. Had she felt nervous, overwhelmed, or had she simply embraced the moment, knowing that she was stepping into a role far greater than herself? Kate took a deep breath, drawing inspiration from the woman who had set such an extraordinary example for generations to come. As she glanced down at her children, she noticed how small they looked against the vastness of the Abbey. George was holding his father's hand tightly, his young face reflecting both curiosity and awe. Charlotte clung to Kate's skirt, peeking out shyly at the rows of dignitaries and clergy seated along the nave. Even little Louis, cradled in William's arms, seemed unusually subdued, as if he could sense the solemnity of the occasion. Kate knelt slightly, bringing herself to eye level with her daughter. "Do you see how beautiful it is?" she whispered, pointing to the shimmering light filtering through the windows. Charlotte nodded slowly, her wide eyes taking in the kaleidoscope of colors. Kate's voice softened as she turned her attention to George. "This place has seen so many important moments," she explained gently. "And today we're part of something very special." George tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. "Will we be here again someday?" he asked innocently. Kate hesitated for a moment, unsure how to answer. Instead of replying directly, She smiled and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happens," she said, "we'll always face it together." The sound of organ music began to swell, pulling Kate back to the present. The deep, resonant notes filled the abbey, vibrating through the air and stirring something deep within her soul. It was a reminder that this day wasn't just about ceremonies or rituals. It was about faith, hope, and the enduring bond between people and their leaders. As the processional began and the congregation rose to their feet, Kate straightened her posture, her earlier nerves giving way to a quiet resolve. She knew that her role here today went beyond titles or appearances. It was about setting an example for her children, representing her family, and standing as a symbol of unity for the nation. With one last glance at her husband and children, Kate took her place among the royal family, ready to witness the crowning of a new king. Though the weight of tradition pressed heavily upon her shoulders, she carried it with grace, knowing that she was not alone. Together, they were writing a new chapter in the story of the monarchy, one rooted in love, service, and the unshakable belief that even in times of change, some things would always remain constant. For young Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and little Prince Louis, the coronation was a whirlwind of sights, sounds, and sensations that seemed almost otherworldly. The grandeur of Westminster Abbey, its towering ceilings, vibrant stained glass windows, and flickering candlelight, was unlike anything they had ever experienced before. Every detail felt larger than life, from the rich embroidery on the clergy's robes to the haunting beauty of the choir's voices rising into the air like smoke. To their curious young minds, it was as if they had stepped into a storybook where kings, queens, and ancient traditions came alive. George sat upright in his seat, trying his best to mimic the composed demeanor of his father. His small hands rested neatly on his lap, but his eyes darted around the abbey with uncontainable curiosity. He noticed how the sunlight streaming through the windows painted colorful patterns on the stone floor, shifting slowly as time passed. "Why does the light move?" he whispered to his sister, leaning closer so as not to disturb the solemn atmosphere. Charlotte shrugged, her attention momentarily diverted from the ceremony. "Maybe it's magic," she replied softly, her voice tinged with wonder. Their quiet exchange brought a faint smile to Kate's lips, though she gently reminded them to focus on the moment. Despite their attempts to stay attentive, the children couldn't help but marvel at the spectacle unfolding before them. When the Archbishop began reciting prayers in Latin, George tilted his head slightly, puzzling over the unfamiliar words. "What does that mean?" he asked under his breath, tugging lightly on his mother's sleeve. Kate leaned down, her expression warm and patient. "It's a special language used for very old ceremonies," she explained quietly. "It's meant to show respect for tradition." George nodded thoughtfully, absorbing her words, though his brow furrowed as he tried to imagine what it must have been like centuries ago when such rituals first began. Charlotte, meanwhile, found herself captivated by the people surrounding them. Rows of dignitaries dressed in elaborate attire sat attentively, their expressions serious yet reverent. She noticed one woman wearing a hat adorned with feathers that swayed gently whenever she moved. "Look, Mama," she whispered excitedly, pointing discreetly. Kate followed her gaze and chuckled softly. "Yes, isn't it lovely?" she murmured, careful not to draw too much attention. Charlotte grinned, clearly delighted by the discovery, before returning her focus to the ceremony. Little Louis, nestled comfortably in William's arms, seemed content simply to observe. Though too young to fully grasp the significance of the day, he responded instinctively to the music and rhythm of the event. When the organ swelled during a particularly powerful hymn, his eyes widened, and he let out a soft giggle, prompting a tender smile from his father. William adjusted his grip slightly, ensuring the toddler remained settled, while exchanging an amused glance with Kate. Even in the midst of such formality, their children managed to inject moments of levity and joy. As the ceremony progressed, George leaned closer to his father, his earlier fascination giving way to deeper questions. "Papa," he whispered, his tone unusually serious, Will we do this someday? William paused, considering how to answer. He glanced briefly at his son, seeing the earnestness in his wide eyes, and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Perhaps, he said gently. But today is about Grandpapa. Our job is to support him and learn from everything happening here. George nodded slowly, processing the response, though the question lingered in his mind. Charlotte, sensing her brother's contemplative mood, reached over and took his hand. Her gesture was simple but meaningful, a reminder that they were in this together. For all their differences in personality, the siblings shared a bond that anchored them even in unfamiliar situations. They huddled slightly closer, drawing comfort from each other's presence. The innocence of the children added a poignant layer to the occasion, while the adults understood the weight of history and tradition. George, Charlotte, and Louis experienced the day through the lens of wonder and imagination. To them, the Abbey was a magical place filled with colors, sounds, and stories waiting to be uncovered. And though they might not fully comprehend the gravity of the coronation, their presence underscored its true purpose: continuity. These were the faces of the future, the ones who would carry forward the values, hopes, and dreams symbolized by the crown. As the ceremony drew to a close, the children looked up at their parents with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. The long hours of sitting still and listening intently had taken their toll, but there was also a spark of excitement in their eyes. For George, Charlotte, and Louis, this day woo. As the ceremony unfolded, Prince William found himself standing near the altar, his gaze fixed on the intricate designs of the ancient stone floor beneath his feet. The Abbey was alive with sounds. The rich harmonies of the choir, the solemn intonations of the Archbishop, and the rustle of robes as dignitaries shifted in their seats. Yet, amidst the grandeur and pageantry, William's mind drifted to quieter moments, memories that felt both distant and vivid all at once. He thought about his childhood, spent in the shadow of Buckingham Palace, and the lessons he had learned from those who shaped him most: his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, and his mother, Princess Diana. The memory of his mother brought a lump to his throat. Diana's laughter echoed softly in his mind. Her warmth and kindness still etched deeply into his heart. She had taught him to see people not as subjects or titles, but as individuals with stories, struggles, and dreams. Be kind, she had often told him, because everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Those words had guided him throughout his life, shaping the way he approached his role as a prince and, more importantly, as a father. Now, as he watched his own children seated nearby, George's curious glances, Charlotte's shy smiles, and Louis's occasional squirms, he realized how much of his mother lived on in them. His thoughts then turned to his grandmother, whose reign had been a beacon of stability for so many. Queen Elizabeth II had dedicated her entire life to service, embodying resilience and grace even in the face of personal challenges. William remembered visiting her at Balmoral as a boy, running through the lush green grounds and listening to her stories about the land, the people, and the responsibilities that came with wearing the crown. She never spoke of duty as a burden. Instead, she framed it as an honor, a chance to make a difference. Standing here today, watching his father prepare to take on that same mantle, William felt a profound mix of emotions: pride, gratitude, and an ache of longing for those no longer physically present. The weight of absence pressed heavily on him, but it was tempered by the knowledge that they were still with him, in spirit, in legacy, and in the values they had instilled. He glanced at Kate, who stood beside him, her expression calm yet thoughtful. Their eyes met briefly, and without needing to say a word, they shared a silent understanding. This day wasn't just about coronation rites or royal protocols. It was about carrying forward the torch passed down through generations. It was about honoring the past while looking toward the future. When the Archbishop began the sacred oath-taking, William's attention returned fully to the moment. His father knelt before the altar, his posture humble yet regal. The crown, resting momentarily on the velvet cushion held by an attendant, gleamed under the soft light streaming through the stained glass windows. William felt his breath catch in his throat. This was the culmination of decades of preparation, sacrifice, and devotion, a moment that connected the past, present, and future in an unbroken chain. He thought about what this meant for his own family. One day, perhaps, George would stand where his grandfather now knelt, taking on the same responsibilities. Would he feel the same weight, the same pride? William hoped that when that time came, his son would remember the lessons he and Kate were teaching him now. That leadership isn't about power, but about compassion, empathy, and unwavering dedication to others. As the Archbishop placed the crown gently onto King Charles II's head, a collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Applause followed, restrained yet heartfelt, as centuries of tradition reached its zenith. William felt tears welling up in his eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. This was not a moment for sadness, but for celebration, for rejoicing in the continuity of something greater than any one person or family. Looking around the abbey, he saw faces filled with emotion, some smiling, others dabbing at their eyes, and many simply gazing upward as if seeking guidance from above. In that moment, William understood something profound. While the monarchy might be steeped in history and ritual, its true strength lay in its ability to unite people, to remind them that they were part of something enduring, something hopeful. And as he clasped hands with Kate and looked over at his children, he knew that their journey was only beginning. Together, they would carry this legacy forward, ensuring that the values of kindness, service, and love remained at the heart of everything they did. The royal motorcade glided smoothly through the streets of London, its polished exterior reflecting the bright sunlight that danced off the windows. Inside the car, the atmosphere was a delicate balance of excitement and solemnity. Prince William sat upright, his posture impeccable, yet there was a softness in his expression as he glanced at his children seated beside him. Outside, the city had transformed into a sea of color and sound. Throngs of people lined the roads, their faces lit with smiles, cameras held high, and hands waving small Union Jack flags. The air buzzed with cheers, applause, and occasional bursts of song. It was impossible not to feel the collective energy radiating from the crowd. Prince George, seated between his parents, pressed his face close to the window, his eyes wide with wonder. He had seen pictures of such scenes before, crowds cheering, streets decorated, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it all. "Mummy, look," he exclaimed, pointing excitedly at a group of children holding handmade banners adorned with glitter and crayon drawings. Kate leaned forward, following his gaze, and smiled warmly. "They're here to celebrate," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of pride. "Just like us." Charlotte, sitting quietly on her mother's lap, clutched Kate's hand tightly, her own excitement tempered by shyness. She peeked out occasionally, her curiosity piqued by the kaleidoscope of colors and sounds outside. For William, the journey to Westminster Abbey was more than just a drive. It was a poignant reminder of the weight of legacy. As the car passed landmarks steeped in history, the Tower of London, St. James's Palace, Buckingham Gate, he couldn't help but think about those who had traveled these same streets before him. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had once ridden through these very routes during her own coronation, her presence inspiring admiration and devotion across the globe. Now, decades later, it was his father's turn to take on the mantle of kingship. William felt a lump rise in his throat as memories of his grandmother flooded his mind. Her quiet strength, her unwavering dedication, and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life. He vowed silently to carry forward her values, ensuring they remained alive in the next generation. Kate, too, was lost in thought. Though she had grown accustomed to royal duties over the years, moments like this still struck a chord deep within her. She glanced down at her children, their innocence and enthusiasm serving as a grounding force. In their laughter and awe, she saw hope, not just for the monarchy, but for the future of the country itself. These were the faces of tomorrow, the ones who would inherit the world shaped by decisions made today. Her role, she realized, extended far beyond being a duchess or a mother. She was part of something much larger, a tapestry of tradition, service, and unity. As the motorcade approached Westminster Abbey, the grandeur of the occasion became even more apparent. The Abbey's towering spires came into view, standing tall against the blue sky like sentinels guarding centuries of history. The car slowed slightly, allowing the family a moment to take in the sight. William reached over and placed a reassuring hand on George's shoulder. "This is where it begins," he murmured, his voice filled with both reverence and determination. George nodded, though his young mind struggled to fully grasp the enormity of what his father meant. Still, he felt a sense of importance settle over him, as if he were stepping into a story much bigger than himself. The cheers grew louder as the car pulled closer to the Abbey, the crowd pressing forward in eager anticipation. Some shouted greetings, while others simply waved, their faces glowing with admiration. For many, seeing the Cambridges arrive was a moment of connection, a chance to witness firsthand the continuation of a cherished institution. Inside the car, the family exchanged quiet smiles, drawing strength from one another. Despite the pomp and circumstance surrounding them, it was their bond that anchored them. Together, they braced themselves for what lay ahead, ready to step onto the stage of history and fulfill their roles with grace, dignity, and heart.